So the big thing in this film, a lot of times you see in Godzilla films, you always have the nuclear discussion, right? And you have a discussion about, Godzilla as kind of like a force of nature or as like an animal. Do we kill him? Do we research him? Things like that. And in this film, you have the nuclear discussions going on, and they have cuts with showing like Hiroshima and stuff like that, the dome, the Peace Memorial Dome, going back to nuclear weapons and things like that back from the war. The scenes that they show of destruction in this film are definitely reminiscent of the earthquakes in Japan as well too, in 2011 and stuff like that as well too. But then you also have one other kind of new discussion that hasn't really been brought up in Godzilla films up until now, which is the kind of discussion about the Japan like self-defense force and its role and the militarization of Japan. And that was really interesting to see. That was kind of like a new angle that you didn't really see in other Godzilla films up until now, and it's definitely something that's a topic of like discussion now in news in Japan these days. So that was kind of cool and interesting to see from that point. That's what kind of made the meeting scene so interesting. And then, one thing that was kind of interesting in the film is, how did they get the Godzilla name? So originally, back in '54, when the first Godzilla film came out in Japan as Gojira. And then when it was brought over to the States, they kind of changed the name to Godzilla. It's not a direct translation, right? They kind of changed it a little bit. I don't want to get deep into it, but they changed it. So originally Gojira, and then it came to be Godzilla when it came to the States. But in this movie, in this story, the people that give the monster the name Godzilla comes from the U.S. first. So at first in Japan, they get a message from the U.S. Navy or the U.S. military saying that they decided on the name Godzilla, and they kind of go into about how they want to use God because it's like a god. And then the Japanese guy's kind of looking at it, he's like, Godzilla. It's kind of hard to say for Japanese. Let's go with Gojira. And they have kanji for Gojira too. I didn't catch the kanji because they only show it for like a brief second, but so it's kind of interesting to see because they kind of like flip it. So this time the Americans give the Godzilla name first, and then the Japanese kind of switch the translation, and they're like, okay, now it's Gojira. So that was kind of interesting and funny to see. And the meeting scenes, they're usually pretty serious, but they have some kind of like funny moments in there as well too, where they're like kind of giving the name, and then one guy just off the side is like, it's just a name for a monster. Like, why is there so much conversation about it? Anything is fine. But yeah, so that was one thing. And Mrs. Shampoo, she thought the meeting scenes were really interesting as well too. She she's Japanese of course, and she definitely thought the meeting scenes were interesting, and that the discussion about using nuclear weapons, it came up because basically Shin Godzilla was kind of destroying the city, and they couldn't do anything to stop him no matter what. More than any other movie. Some other movies they'll throw like missiles at Godzilla and stuff, and it'll kind of like flinch or move around. This film, Shin Godzilla is basically just standing in the same pose the whole movie, more or less. In this pose right here, he's kind of standing there. Missiles are flying at him, you see explosions go off, and he's just in the same pose, and he's just kind of walking, and that's it. So you see that, and basically there's nothing else they can do. The U.S. basically suggests to use nuclear weapons again, and the Japanese officials are basically kind of discussing about if they should even use nuclear weapons or allow America to bring over a nuclear weapon, and they ultimately don't, but that's definitely a thing of discussion in the film. And Mr. Shampoo was kind of saying how that's something that is it's still a topic of debate in Japan now. And speaking of how they're showing scenes or screenshots of like the Hiroshima area, next month, so right now it's the end of July, beginning of the next month is when the actual atomic bombs were dropped back in the war. So it's kind of timely in terms of that. And one thing Mr. Shampoo mentioned that was a good point is that that happened way back, and people that were lived during that time and, are still alive today that didn't, die during a time or died due to sickness or disease that are still alive. They're kind of in their 80s now, so everyone's kind of getting older and there's not really a huge voice behind it. And it's kind of interesting to have a film like Godzilla kind of bring that discussion back to the forefront, to kind of remind everyone to not forget about what happened in the past, So it's just kind of interesting to see that kind of story be told throughout the meeting scenes and the things like that. So let's talk more about Godzilla. The Godzilla design in this film, at first when I saw the evolutionary form, I was like, okay, like it's super weird, doesn't look anything like Godzilla, but I can get past it because it's gonna evolve and stuff, and it evolves and it looks, it looks pretty cool. I mean, Shin Godzilla, it's not the Godzilla that I want, but I can accept it, But then it kind of keeps on expanding, and Godzilla's attacks in this film. So his usual atomic breath, he still has that. It's super crazy now. It's super way more. This is the most powerful Godzilla in any Godzilla movie by far. He's completely unstoppable and destroys everything in a matter of seconds. So his atomic breath, he opens his jaw and he opens it so wide. Like this would be like a normal Godzilla, right? He opens up his jaw, shoots out the breath. This Godzilla, he's like opening it like all the way. It just looks, again, disturbing. And if that wasn't enough, he opens his jaw and then his bottom jaw actually expands too. So it kind of like reminded me of like a predator like mouth, and that I wasn't expecting that at all. I was kind of surprised by that. So his mouth opens and then bottom jaw spreads out and he's basically shooting out his atomic breath like that. And I was like, that just looks nasty, and I get what they're going for. I get what the director is going for the film, but it's just not something that I didn't really care for from a design perspective, from an art perspective for Godzilla, And speaking of atomic breath and beams and stuff like that, Godzilla has another new attack in this film where he lights up his back spines, and then he basically shoots lasers from his back spines, and is basically shooting out into the sky, and they're just kind of going all around him. And I saw that, and I was like, again, it's not really what I like. We haven't really seen that in a Godzilla film before, and there's no reason why it can't happen. But it just seemed like it was like too powerful. Like he just completely destroyed everything, by using his back lasers or whatever. But I was like, okay, whatever. It's new Godzilla, Shin Godzilla. I can accept it, right? Beams from his mouth, beams from his back. Now I have to go into his tail. So if that wasn't enough from having beams coming out from his back, Godzilla's tail is actually very important in this movie. Godzilla's end of his tail actually also shoots out a beam. It has some kind of, way that it can shoot out a beam. So there's a point in the movie where he's kind of shooting out stuff from his mouth and stuff from his tail and stuff from his back's going off. It's crazy. It looks so weird, and I didn't like it. I just wasn't a fan of it. I just thought it was kind of changing up the Godzilla biology too much a little bit, and we'll get into that in a little bit here. So to get to the point, there's a lot of military scenes, and not a lot of scenes with like meetings and leaders and things like that. The military scenes are actually pretty cool in this movie. I think they're one of the better military scenes in any of the other movies. Just the photography of them is really awesome. Makes them look really intense and real. It shows a lot of the soldiers and stuff preparing the tanks, setting them up. And whenever they use a new kind of weapon or missile or a new tank or something like that, it actually shows on the bottom of the screen. It shows a subtitle that shows like what classification or what kind of missile they're using. Like it's super detailed, and I imagine that was something that the director wanted to put in because they wanted to emphasize the kind of different the details and of every kind of ammunition the military was using and stuff. And I thought that was kind of interesting to see. It was kind of cool that they put that kind of thought and detail into it and kind of brought it into like realism. That it wasn't just some kind of like sci-fi movie or nothing like that. So eventually Godzilla's like unstoppable, and they realize that the only chance they have is to kind of cool down Godzilla and kind of like freeze him, essentially. Something we've also seen in other Godzilla movies. And, you know, they end up doing this, and Godzilla basically ends up being frozen in the middle of Tokyo. And he doesn't die. He's still frozen. And that's how the movie ends. And before the movie ends, you get one last shot of just a silent shot, no music or nothing. And it kind of pans from Godzilla, and it kind of goes to the tip of his tail. And that's, you know, there's probably 3 main shocking moments of the whole movie. First shocking moment, when you first see Godzilla come up on shore and he's like a weird evolutionary, like, you know, tadpole kind of thing. Second shocking moment is when you see Godzilla using all his different beam weapons, and including the beam that's coming out of his tail. Third shocking moment, the last like 2 seconds of the film, when they show a close-up of Godzilla's tail, which has always looked different in previews and stuff, but you haven't really seen a close-up shot of it. They show a close-up shot of it, and what you see is I don't know if they're corpses or if they're like skeletons. I think they were like skeletons, basically. Like, you only see it for like, again, like a second or two, and then the movie cuts out. It looked like they were like skeletons or like corpses, kind of like frozen, reaching out of Godzilla's like tail, and you know, it just looks really morbid and really gruesome. There's reaching out of Godzilla's tail, so there's always basically corpses at the end of Godzilla's tail, and they're reaching out. And that's one thing. The most shocking thing is that these human corpses, or these human skeletons that are on the end of Godzilla's tail frozen, that are like reaching out, they have Godzilla spines. They have the Godzilla dorsal fins. And you're like, what? And then the movie cuts out. And I just don't know. You know, there's so many ways to interpret that. I couldn't stop thinking about Alien Resurrection, you know, and having like, you know, hybrid, half human, half Godzilla things. I don't know the meaning behind it. I think you can go a few ways with it. I think you can either go that, because they do talk about in the film about how Godzilla is like an asexual beast, how he doesn't need it, you know, another, you know, Godzilla to reproduce. He can basically reproduce by himself. So I think one way to go with it is that his tail is basically the reproductive organ, and is basically creating new Godzillas, I guess, or some kind of monsters, human-like Godzilla monsters. So that's one way to go with it. I think another way to go with it is that, you know, that's symbolic of like the monsters that humanity has become through, you know, nuclear weapons and things like that. I think that's, you know, certainly one way to go with it. You know, again, how do you interpret that? Like, that was the most shocking moment in the whole movie, this last 2 seconds. You just see humans with Godzilla dorsal fins. And I was like, what is going on even? And then the movie just ends, and you know, the end, and they show the credits, and the credits are real kind of like classic, just like you would see in, you know, other Godzilla films, and they have the Godzilla, you know, theme or Godzilla traditional music playing, which is awesome. And that's how the movie ends. So, you know, I didn't go super in detail about the whole story. I mean, there's so much to talk about, I could just keep on going. My overall thoughts on the film, when I came out, I was kind of disappointed, because I just couldn't stop thinking about that last ending shot with the humans coming out of Godzilla with dorsal fins and stuff like that, and the beam weapons and the way the mouth looked and Godzilla just design. I was kind of bummed out about that. But you know, that was when I first came out of the film. I thought about it some more. The story of the film is actually really good. I think the story of the film is really well told. The most disappointing thing about the movie was Godzilla's design, and you know, Mr. Shampoosh kind of, you know, agreed as well too. She liked, you know, how Godzilla used to look. You know, the Godzilla has a symbolic appearance. You know, like, this is Godzilla, right? And it was just really surprising just to see how different Godzilla was. But the good thing about the film, like I said, the story, the actors for the most part were all pretty good. The characters and stuff, like I said, the meeting scenes, the board meetings, stuff like that, they were more than any other Godzilla film, but they were also the most interesting. I think there were still probably a little bit too much of them, but the scenes of them, they were interesting. The story was good. The topics that they were talking about with all recent Japan issues were good. Sometimes they had a little humorous moment here and there, which were also good. But all in all, it was a pretty serious film, and it's an interesting film. And I can't wait to see it again, whether it be in the theaters or when it comes out on DVD and Blu-ray. Haven't decided yet. It'll be interesting to see how the community reacts to it. I tried looking on Twitter real quick, just at like Japanese fans' reactions, and it seems like mostly everyone seems to be pretty positive or at least shocked by it. I haven't gone super deep into it. But I'm looking forward to seeing how other people react to the film, because right now I just don't know how I feel about it. It's there's things I like about it. There's things I don't like about it. The biggest thing for me is that it's just so different compared to any other Godzilla film, and it worries me. It's like you see the tail at the end with the humans coming out of it, and it's like, how do you make a sequel to that? Are they gonna even try? I think the film is representative of what Godzilla is. I think it's a worthy of a Godzilla film for sure. But I just don't know how I feel about it at the end of the day, in terms of as a movie. Is it a movie that's enjoyable to watch? How is it compared to the rest of the Godzilla films? Like, my Godzilla is, the Showa era Godzilla, Heisei Godzilla, Millennium Series Godzilla, and it's been such a long time. It's been like over 10 years now since a Japanese Godzilla film. So we've had such a long time to kind of internalize the Godzilla series throughout the whole its whole history. So to have such a brand new kind of like different and wild like concept, it's hard to take in at first. And I guess at the end of the day, I'm not sure how I feel about the film. But I do want to say it's a really interesting film, and I just can't wait until more people go out and see it, because there's a conversation to be had about it for sure. And like I said, it's probably not going to be a film that, if you're not into Godzilla, it's probably not going to get you real hyped or get you real into it. It's really a film that's going to be for the people that are the hardcore Godzilla fans, and it's going to get them talking for sure. So, I mean, this video's been going on for so long, but I hope you guys liked it, man, because I was looking forward to this film for a long time, and there's just so much to talk about. I feel like it's such an interesting film to see. And it's not the direction that I would have liked to see Godzilla go in, to be honest, but I can't be mad or disappointed with it either. I think it's an alright film. So, thanks for checking this out, and if you can get a chance to see it, I know I've heard news that Funimation or something is going to be doing like a limited theater run of it. They're definitely going to be putting out in Blu-ray in the States for sure at some point. Might have to wait till next year. But definitely go see it, because you got to see what Japan's putting out for Godzilla. And I think it's really interesting to be in this time, whereas, before, let's go back to like 98, right, with the 98 American Godzilla film, and then right after that, next year, they came out with Godzilla, Millennium, right, Godzilla 2000, and you kind of saw Japan's response to the American film, kind of, and during that time, it's like, the Japanese film was like so much better. Like, Godzilla 2000 is such a better film than Godzilla 98, which like everyone like hates and is like the worst Godzilla film. But I think it's interesting now where we can have the Godzilla film from America from 2 years ago, and then the Japanese Shin Godzilla. And to me, there's things I kind of like and don't like about the recent American remake too, but I don't think it's a bad movie either. And I think, whereas before with the 98 film and Godzilla 2000, it's like, well, obviously Godzilla 2000 is like way better. But I think it's interesting now that we can be in a time where I think both the American Godzilla film and the Japanese Godzilla film can kind of appeal to different audiences, and I think they both have their good and like bad points about them. And right now, for me personally, I can't really decide what I like better, if I like the 2014 American Godzilla or if I like the new Shin Godzilla movie better. I can't really decide because I think they each kind of have their own ups and downs, and you know, my opinion will definitely change over time, I'm sure. Like, I just saw the movie today. Oh, okay, so this is like fresh out of my mind. I'm still talking about this as I'm reviewing it. I'm going to definitely have to do a follow-up on my thoughts on this movie, maybe. Who knows, into the future. Maybe a couple months down the line, a year down the line, or whatever, and see how my opinions change about it. But I think it's interesting the time that we live in, that we can have two separate kind of Godzilla films that are both interesting and then both are good for their own reasons and can appeal to kind of different crowds. And I think that's good for the Godzilla franchise. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. It's been long enough as it is, so thanks for watching. And I'll definitely be back with more content, including Godzilla and non-Godzilla stuff. So check us back later. Thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you later. Peace.